fleeing to the disreputable North and abandoning the law degree that would have allowed her father to add an S to the family firm's shingle. But while A.C. Lee and Daughters was not meant to be, and Lee did not become a lawyer, she did eventually create the most admired attorney in America. Although Lee never formally studied creative writing, she spent her years in Tuscaloosa teaching herself to write. She had a recurring column in the college newspaper, The Crimson White, and contributed sketches to the student humor magazine, The Rammer Jammer, which she eventually edited. Even then, her roving curiosity and intellectual range were evident on the page. In a review of recent British films, a parody of Shakespeare, a send-up of The Registrar, a roast of the rural newspaper her father edited and owned. And her byline always marked the entrance to a briar patch. What followed was prickly and irreverent, like Nell herself, as she was known back then. A Chi Omega who corrected her sorority sisters whenever they mispronounced words, Lee wore blue jeans and Bermuda shorts at a time when women were discouraged from wearing anything but dresses, cursed more than the crew of the USS Enterprise, and once scandalized the entire campus by smoking a cigar on the hood of a car in the homecoming parade. Lee knew approximately one person in New York City when she moved there at age 23, but what a person he was. Truman Capote, who had spent some of his childhood living next door to her, and who would later serve as the model for the puny, puckish Charles Baker Dill Harris in her novel. The budding authors felt like apart people, as Capote later put it, already able to read years before their peers, playing with language the way others did dolls and footballs. The pair conspired with each other to write adventures, tall tales, and verses of the sort they so liked reading, from the Bobbsey twins to Beowulf and the Rover Boys to Rudyard Kipling, clattering away at the typewriter that A.C. Lee had given his bookish youngest daughter. In lieu of college, Capote had gone directly to work as a copy boy at The New Yorker. A few years later, Lee landed her own job in publishing, although at nowhere near so storied a publication. While Capote had scandalized editor Harold Ross by wearing a cape and annoyed Robert Frost by disrupting one of his poetry readings, Lee faced the drudgery of proofreading conference calendars and education news for the monthly magazine of the American School Publishing Corporation, a trade rag called The School Executive. Eventually, she left that day job for another, this one as an airline reservation clerk, which was less literary, but theoretically more glamorous. The same could not be said of the rest of her life back then. Around the edges of her 9-to-5 work, she lived off peanut butter sandwiches while drafting stories at a desk she made for herself with 2 old apple crates and a door she found in the basement of her building. Writing on that shaky surface, Lee gradually steadied her hand. "I do believe that my greatest talent lies in creative writing," she wrote to her family, confidingly and confidently, "and I do believe I can make a living at it." Like so many aspiring authors, she initially turned to that family and her own early life for material, and the first 3 stories in this collection shuffle through a series of young narrators to explore the social mores, tiny transgressions, and moral confusion of what, in one of her later stories, she so beautifully calls childhood's secret society. The stakes of the water tank, the binoculars, and the pinking shears, all written before she turned 30, are profoundly circumscribed, the approval of one's parents and the acceptance of one's peers, and the antagonists aren't very grand either: teachers, siblings, schoolyard cliques. The next 3 stories, by contrast, are all set in New York with adult narrators, and one senses Lee trying to keep up with the Salingers and Cheevers. Still, that trio, A Room Full of Kibble, The Viewers and the Viewed, and This Is Show Business, does show her moving beyond incident and toward plot, while simultaneously experimenting with different narrative voices. They take the not-quite experimental form of a comic tragic monologue about a should-have-been medicated friend, The heckling banter of an Upper East Side.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.